Yeah, I did.
Well, hi. I'm so glad to see so many people here. I'm so glad you're interested. I hope I can teach you something that does for your life what it did for mine, because this has been a real life-changing practice for me to learn Bale gardening. My name is Sue Bartels. I live in Gardenville, which is a wonderful thing. And in addition to arthritis and degenerative disc disease and all sorts of horrible things, I also developed vitiligo about 15 years ago, which keeps me from going out in the sun. So my gardening was severely curtailed. I've been unable to garden for a long time. And I learned on the internet, I learned about straw bale gardening on a forum. There's a site called davesgarden.com, and any of you who are interested in anything to do with growing anything, it is the most amazing site. It's just, the depth of it is incredible. It covers everything, and one of the things it covers is straw bale gardening, which is what I learned initially. And
say again the name.
Dave's, it's on your handout. You'll see.
Oh, okay.
I've written it all down for you.
It's in here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tried to put everything in there. I may have forgotten a couple of things, but you can ask me questions at the end if I don't cover stuff. And anyway, the concept basically is there's no weeding, there's no tilling. It's raised gardening. So people in wheelchairs, people with physical disabilities like mine and worse can do it. You can have a hay bale garden or a straw bale garden if you so choose, but I don't know why anybody would want to do it. You can have it on the back of your truck if you want. You know, it's such a versatile form of gardening, and there's so little waste. You use much less water, you use much less fertilizer, and the first time I heard about it, I read probably 2 or 3 years worth of conversations on this forum where I initially learned about it. And the question kept popping up in my mind, why would you want to go with straw bales? Because straw is nothing but a venue. It offers no nutrients and it doesn't really hold moisture. So it just didn't make sense to me, and I thought, well, this is the way my mind works. I'm always asking questions. So the first year that I had my garden, I decided to try half and half and get some good information. So I got 20 bales of straw and 20 bales of hay, and I planted them identically, the same day, the same plants, just so I could watch and see what happened. And I love to say I was right, and I was right. It was the difference was like night and day. Number one, the straw had to be watered at least twice a day. The hay only needed to be watered once a day. The straw needed to be fertilized much more heavily because it didn't offer anything to the plants. But the plants gained so many nutrients from the hay that it was insane. I mean, the pictures that I had at home, which unfortunately I didn't have any way to bring and show them to you. The same plants, literally the same exact plants planted in one or the other produced different plants. I mean, zinnias, for instance, that I planted in both, the ones that I planted in the straw were very well behaved, demure little pastel zinnias. And the same plants in the hay produced these wonky, big, wonderful, bright, crazy zinnias. You know, it was amazing. And the size of the plants, one zucchini plant in a hay bale will be like this big around and this high off the bale. It produces incredibly. So I'll start you from the beginning. As I explained in your handout, I tried to explain kind of how you need to think about planting your garden, and this is the time to be doing it because you need about a month preparation before you can plant. You need to process your bales, And so you're going to think about how many bales you need in, I mean, this is not something for commercial growers, obviously. This is something for a home garden. It's ideal. It's great for organic gardeners. And if you can use, if you have a wall of your house or your barn or your garage that gets full sun, that is such a plus, because not only does it become a growing area, but it also, the heat of the building will help your fruit to ripen. And it's a big plus and a good way to use the space. So anyway, you're going to plan your bales. Basically, you're going to, for most plants, you're going to put 2 plants to a bale. For your tomatoes or your squash or your beans and peas, you could put probably 3. But for the larger plants, you're going to want to put maybe 2 to a bale. And when I plant tomatoes, I do companion planting. I'll put basil plants in front of them, because that not only helps to keep the bugs away, but it also looks nice, and it's just good use of the bales. So after you plan that, you're going to want to call your local farmer, and Dan Crooks is about as good as they get, but make sure I get my bales before yours. And a lot of your local farmers, if you order enough bales, will deliver them to you, and that's a good thing. And when I lay my garden out, basically what I did was to put them kind of in a horseshoe or a U shape, and I get pallets and put in between, the ones you find along the side of the road, wooden pallets. And basically what that does is, if you're growing squash or anything that's going to trail, melons or pumpkins or anything like that, that's going to trail and lay on the ground, it's good to have them grow under the pallet, because that keeps them up off the ground, it keeps them from rotting, and it keeps the air circulating around them and lets them stay warmer. And it also just makes them a little bit easier to pick. As many of the plants as you can, it's good to grow vertically. I put a wire mesh behind my garden about 6 or 8 feet tall. And the squash, the beans, the peas, the tomatoes, almost everything really loves to climb if you give it half a chance. So that I recommend highly. And then you decide how many bales you need. You order your bales, you get them delivered, you place them the way you want them in your garden, and then you start the process. And the process basically is, for 2 weeks you're going to soak them with your hose every day. You're just going to soak them with water. The 3rd week you're going to want to use a high nitrogen fertilizer on them every other day for a week. Now, a lot of people get very squeamish when you start talking about peeing on things, but this is farming, and it's like there's no room for the squeamish here. Peeing on them is the best thing, or you can go into your agway and you can buy somebody else's pee. They call it urea, but it's still just pee, you know. So if you're using urea, you use about 1 cup a day per bale, and then you water that into the bale, not through the bale, just into the bale. So you don't want to wash it out. You want it to sit in there and start composting the hay. So you do that every other day for a week. You're going to do that 3 times. And you can save up your urine in jugs and use that on the bales, and it works just fine. I always said, since I live next door to the garden bill, I was just going to put an out-of-order sign on the men's room with arrows in my garden. I think that would be a good way to do it, but I haven't done it yet. So then you'll notice at the end of that week, you can buy a thermometer for it, but your finger works real good if you pay attention. Just stick your finger down into the bale, and if the bale is hot, that means it's composting the way it should. And the question everybody always says about hay is like, well, what about the seeds? It's going to grow weeds. Well, the composting process burns off the weeds, so it's a moot point. It's not a problem. And it's so funny because people, they know that they're composting, but it just seems to escape a lot of people that kind of kills the problem. So at the end of that week, you've got a hot bale. You let it cool off for about a week. You keep it moist. And as soon as the temperature on the bale goes down, you're ready to plant. And what I do when I plant is just kind of stick your hands in and just pull a little pocket in the bale. I keep a compost pile, so take some nice compost or buy some composted soil. and put a little bit in the bottom. Take your plant. I start my plants at home. You can buy your plants if you want to, but it's so easy to start them. And those little peat pellets are what I use, and they're just wonderful. And take your plant with the dirt that comes around it, stick it down into that little pocket, top it off with some soil, and that's it. You water once a day, soak the bales nicely. Obviously, the airflow around the bales is going to dry them out a little bit more quickly than the soil would dry out, but the soil, your water is dissipating through such a, it's just going to China. We all know it all goes there. So you just want to keep it in the bale. And most days, unless we get like a couple of weeks of 90+ degree days, you're not going to have a problem. Once a day is going to be enough with hay bales.
What time of day?
The best time to water is either after the sun goes down or first thing in the morning. Obviously you don't want to water in the heat of day because the plants will get burned that way, and it just doesn't seem to be as effective. And there are certain things like Epsom salts is a wonderful thing to use in your garden. You use that on your tomato plants. And it's also a great thing to use if you have rose bushes. Epsom salts is a wonderful strengthener for your plants, and especially effective for tomatoes and roses. If you're growing legumes, I always buy a legume inoculant. You buy a little envelope of this black. It's kind of a bacteria that you put your legume seeds in before you plant them, and that draws more nitrogen from the soil or from the medium and grows a stronger plant and gives a higher yield. And the neatest thing is that you kind of don't even notice it until toward the end of the season, but the plants actually consume the hay bale. And by the end of the summer, there's nothing left. You're down to your soil and it's all gone. It's just such a neat process.
Is there any odor to the bales?
Odor?
Odor, yeah. As they're rotting, as they're being used up, do they smell at all?
No.
Thank you.
No, they're outside anyway, so maybe if you stuck your nose in one, you might smell
And do
something.
they attract any of the wildlife?
I have a fence around my garden. I've never had a problem with anything. I've never had a problem with bugs. I'm sure that if I didn't have a fence around it, deer would probably get to them because they get hungry too. It's harder for bunnies and stuff. Unless you got jumping bunnies, they're not likely to be as much of a problem.
The lice would be underneath, so you'd probably have more bolt protection.
Yeah, I have not had any problems. It's just been such an incredible way to garden, and the strength and the robustness of the plants is amazing. I've never seen better, stronger, bigger plants, and the yield has been just wonderful.
Looking at that bale of hay, which way?
You-
Lay it that way
okay.
or lay it down?
No, you want to put it so your strings are off the ground, because if they were laying down on the ground, they'd rot. So you want to put it this way, plus the fact that it's also easier to reach down in it from the way that it's stacked. It's easier to plant in it this way. Huh? Right, you're going to go, the roots will end up going down into the ground. By the end of the season, because the hay just gets consumed. And I had Dan and Annette drop these off just so I could show any of you who really don't understand the difference between them. The straw is basically the shaft, so it doesn't have the nutrients. It's not a food, and the water goes through it. It doesn't really hold anything. The hay is all nutrient. It's food, and it really soaks up water beautifully and holds it very well. So, it's so funny. You'll go on YouTube and put in straw bale gardening, and there will be 50 videos about straw bale gardening and not one about hay bale gardening. And on this forum, I wrote to them for a year, and I just said, it's just try the hay bales. I'm telling you, you'll never go back to straw. Yes, dear.
Okay. What kind of hay? Because I buy hay for my horses and I buy hay for my sheep, and the one for my horses is very poor quality. It's first cutting Timothy grass and it's really ripe and it doesn't have a lot of nutrition in it. Do you need good hay, or can
No,
you
as
get
I
junk
said in
hay?
there, you don't really have to have feed quality hay. You can have milk quality hay. I mean, the better quality hay you have, the better nutrient it's going to give to the plant. But they seem to do just fine with a lesser quality.
Because
You just ask the farmer.
yeah, ask the neighbors.
Yeah.
And ask them how much.
What do you do with the Epsom salt?
You put it, you take about a cup of it and put it in a ring around the plant and water it. And it's a really neat thing. I've known it for years and years about roses, but I never knew it about tomato plants until last year.
Is that a one-time application, like when you grow it, right when you plant it?
I would say maybe once or twice a season would probably be enough. Yeah, you don't do it all the time. Yeah, and as far as fertilizing, what I do, I mean, there are some people that swear by Miracle Grow. I like to garden organically. I just don't like using stuff that I don't know what's in it. So I started using fish emulsion, which is, you want to talk about something stinky. But when I got one of those little screw-on bottles for my hose that comes with Miracle Grow, if you've ever seen those, that disperses, that dilutes and disperses, and I use that for fish emulsion. So I fill it about 2/3 full of fish emulsion and just use it and when I water, it smells just like the ocean. So it was like, I thought, how am I going to know if it's diluting properly? But I just tried it, and I could tell by the way it smelled that it was just right. And then this year I got another garbage can, and I'm going to make compost tea with manure and just keep that there for supplemental fertilizing. And you really don't need anything more than that. That's really all you'll ever need.
I'm offering all the sheep manure anybody wants for free, or to make compost tea. So
Cool.
see me.
Is it seasoned or?
I have the pelleted kind that you just put in a bucket, or you can get. We don't have as much of the season.
Cool. Yeah, I don't have any experience at all with sheep manure. I
It's
don't
pretty.
know how it compares to
It's just about right.
Yeah. Cool. That's great.
Yeah, you can combine a sheet with a bucket and put it right on your plant.
Yeah.
Really?
It does not have to be
But
seasoned.
it's
It
great.
doesn't burn. Isn't that interesting?
Their own.
Is their diet that much different?
They digest it more thoroughly than a horse does.
Yeah, they're bovine. They're not bovine, they have several stomachs.
They're ruminants.
They're ruminants, that's the word I wanted.
Come on. But probably not nearly as rude smelling as cow dung, I hope.
No, it
I
doesn't.
could not have that in my garden. Yes, my dear.
I was curious about mineral content, because, potatoes, for example, gain so much value from the soil.
Now, potatoes are not something you're going to want to grow in Bale.
Oh, but my mother always did. They were
Potatoes,
fantastic.
Yeah, my brother does.
In Bale?
Yes.
Now, I know about
In
making
bales.
enclosures
No. She would put a little bit of soil in, put the potatoes in, and
In the bale.
In the bale.
I just
That's-
met an
my brother's
expert
been doing it.
at the
He does the
Philadelphia
work.
Flower Show from
Okay.
Maine who really knows about growing potatoes, and she's doing it in straw bale. I don't think she knows about the hay bale.
Right.
But what about the mineral content in general, in terms of, usually the plant is pulling minerals, not just nourishment from the soil.
Well, you have some soil, and even when you're growing anything you're going to plant in the bales, there's some soil and compost you're putting in with it, a little bit, and you're fertilizing. And I hate to speak to something I haven't done myself. What I knew about potato planting was doing an enclosure and starting them in compost and filling in over top of them with straw and hay. But I've never heard about putting them in them, because I tell people you don't do root crops in hay bales. You don't use it for turnips or carrots.
For fingerlings.
Interesting.
But I'm
That's
just
really-
wondering about anything in general. You want not just the vitamins, but you want minerals. And is there any comparison? I mean, do you know of any?
You can find it in
I would
books.
say it's something that you just have to try it. I mean, the water where I live is very hard, so I would think the water alone would
We
give.
have a lot of calcium in your grass hays, but who's a grass hay farmer that's here?
Are there any grass hay farmers here?
We all grow grass.
What's the mineral content of your hays?
Atkins,
You don't know.
But I know the water around here has a high mineral content. Yeah.
she was saying about, drawing minerals out. You got to remember, over the summer, this bale is basically composting itself. So
Absolutely.
it's basically becoming compost.
Right.
So that's where you're going to be getting your minerals throughout the year. And that's why you see the difference between the hay and the straw.
It's incredible how much it gives to the plant. And just the fact that at the end of the summer it's completely gone, it's been completely consumed by the plants, I found fascinating. But for me, I read a whole lot, but then I kind of just figured whatever I'm really going to know, I'm going to know by doing it. And I've done it 2 summers, and I've had such good results. Potatoes, as I say, I haven't tried, although I've wanted to. But I haven't done that yet.
She's an expert. She's this woman who's certified in foods, freezing and canning and drying for the state of Maine and the state of Georgia. And she grew up in Maine digging potatoes, so she's got it.
Well, that sounds a little schizophrenic, Maine and Georgia. Is that culture shock for you?
I would think it'd be harder to harvest in a bale.
Well, that's the reason I always thought the idea of putting the bale enclosure and starting them in some compost and just filling in on top of them, then you can reach in and pick clean potatoes. It's wonderful. That's the way I've heard about doing it. And that's very appealing. And the neat thing is that you can plant around, you can put nasturtiums and things around the outside of the bales. So they're incredibly beautiful, plus they have a food value. And you can also, for greens, you can just take your bale and put a layer of soil and compost on top and seed directly into the bale. And just you cut your greens instead of picking them. And with 2 bales, I had greens the whole summer. They just kept producing. It's just incredible.
That was going to be my next hand raising. How do you know how much to put in each bale?
Well, you pretty much
do too much.
Well, yeah, a friend of mine did that last year. She put too many in. Like I tried to explain in there, you look at your bale the way you would look at an equal-sized piece of ground. How many plants would you put in that piece of ground? I generally, as a rule of thumb, put 2 tomato plants or 2 zucchini plants in a bale. I'll put maybe 3 or 4 bean or pea plants in a bale. And then, as I said, I do companion planting. I'll put some basil plants in the front of the
bale.
Yeah, oh yeah, all on top. Absolutely.
Keep like mice and squirrels and things like that, and bunnies especially.
Well, bunnies, as I said, unless they're hopping bunnies, I mean, you're up this high.
Yeah, bunnies.
I have a fence around my garden, so.
Nothing stops.
Nothing stops squirrels except
Nothing is sacred.
stops every time.
I've never had a problem.
Do you think that, like, if you put bees on it,
Well, the pea probably helps
that might
too.
help discourage some
It
of
probably
the
does.
animals, too.
It probably does.
I mean, if you really
and if you've got a man around, they just love it. They just love to go out and pee on the garden. And it's always a good idea, even if you have a garden in the ground. If you pee around the outside of it, I mean, it sounds funny, but it's for real. You know, it really does help. And it's fun. What the hell? Let's get real from it.
You gotta trust the seeds down.
Yeah, you don't even have to put your seed. It's a wonderful thing.
So how about bulbs? Can we just put bulbs into bales?
Well, bulbs are not so good because bulbs are perennial. Bulbs you want to grow again, and the bale's going to be gone. So.
And you don't think they'll like funnel down into the earth?
Well, they might, but it's not a great.
Might be great for dahlias.
Bulbs you don't need to worry about weeds or anything. Bulbs you just put in the ground and they do just fine on their own. So there's really no.
Dahlias.
Or cannas or something.
Huh?
Yeah.
You could, but I mean, I don't see the point to it. They're fine in the ground and weeds don't really bother them, so I just don't see the point.
Yeah, I'm just sort of curious, the soil I have is really bad. And it's like, there's like this much topsoil.
Well, the first thing I have to say to you is start composting.
Right, yeah, I mean, I can get that, but, like, I haven't even started the garden plot where I moved to. So, I'm wondering, like, as I use the hay bale, and it sort of disappears.
You're going to be enriching your
Well,
soil.
definitely
Oh,
that.
absolutely.
But will the roots of what I'm planting, will they want to go into the, like, the virgin earth?
Eventually, but by that time, you will have enriched the soil underneath with everything that's come down through the bale.
But even in one season?
Because it's basically, it's
I
compost.
get that, yeah. I get
So-
that. I just wasn't sure like how fast those roots were going to want to get into
Oh, well,
beyond.
they've got to grow down through all that.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
by the end of the summer. The only reason they go into the ground at all is because this wears away.
Sure.
So and you know, composting. There's a lot more to composting than I ever realized. For years, I've always saved my kitchen scraps and stuff, and I thought I was composting because I just didn't understand the ratio. But basically, I believe it's 1 to 3 green to brown, you know, to make it a successful compost. And if you don't put in enough either hay or grass clippings or whatever with your kitchen waste, it just isn't going to break down properly. But once you learn how to do it, I had a couple of composters. I had one that rotated and one that was just in the ground, and I got rid of them last year. Put a couple of these flats around the circle and just do it in the ground so you can get there and turn it over and water it and the air gets to it. And it just makes compost so quickly. It's a wonderful thing to do.
So dig a hole.
You don't need to dig a hole. You don't need to dig a hole.
Right in the ground.
Just put it right in the ground. Just put something around, 3 sides around it and put it there and just...
You said that the hay bale disappears. What, does it hold its shape for the season?
Until the end of the
everything
season,
fall
and then
under?
it's gone. The end of the season, it isn't there anymore. It's been eaten by the plants.
You mean then all the plants are down on the ground?
Well, by the end of the season, the plants are ready to die anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It just slowly sinks.
Yeah.
Fully disintegrates.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's not so much that it disintegrates. It's consumed. It doesn't spread out. So it just gets eaten by the plant. So now you could put an enclosure around your bales if you wanted to. I've often thought that I'd really like to do that just because it would make them last a little longer. It would probably hold moisture even better. But I don't have anybody to do that for me, so I haven't ever done it.
Do you think if you have in your hand crazy wild mint fruits every year, if you put the bale on top, do you think that'll be
Mint
enough
would
to
grow right up.
suck
Right up. The healthiest damn mint you ever saw.
it might suffocate it if I started
Oh, Rachel, I love mint.
Oh.
Mint beds should be started where you're never going to want to do anything else. Just put them all, you know, that's what I...
Maybe you bring out the parties.
Oh, I love mint. Yes.
I have a comment and a question. The comment is that anyone who likes the thought of gardening without tilling, without fertilizing, without weeding, but would like to grow corn and potatoes could read Ruth Stout's books. Ruth Stout has written a dozen more books about, there's one here,
No work garden?
no work gardening. That's the one. But she tends to garden with loose hay or broken hay bales instead of directly in the bales. But you can get potatoes that way.
Yeah, that would be what I would think for potatoes, for
But
sure.
the question is that decomposing, composting tends to consume a lot of nitrogen. You don't need to add something nitrogen rich like cottonseed meal.
Well, that's what the urine's for. That's
Yeah.
high in nitrogen.
And your initial use of the high nitrogen is how you compost your bale. Then through the rest of the summer, fish emulsion that's all I used. And as I said, this year I'll be using compost tea to supplement that, which would certainly add that. I don't really think you need. I mean, my experience has been that you don't need anything else, and that's one of the things. The self-sufficiency aspect of it I find so pleasing. You know, and just the fact that you can create something that's so abundant and so strong, and you're not using anything artificial, and at the end of the season, it's just gone. It's just beautiful, you know. Yes.
If I put the hay bale on grass, at the end of the season, will the grass be burned out, or will
Probably. I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not getting any
Like
light.
the lasagna gardening. You've killed the grass, but you have all that.
You roll it on.
Lasagna gardens where you do layers of leaves and then grass, but you start on grass.
Oh.
And when that grass dies out, you get the richest soil you ever have
Oh,
had.
because you're making compost.
Yeah, it's really high
Just
nitrogen.
compost, yeah. composting is so cool. I never understand why. I don't know if anybody here has ever heard of Findhorn. Have you heard of Findhorn? Findhorn is a fascinating story that I learned years and years ago from my church of a community in Scandinavia that, in Scotland, I'm sorry. It's been a long time since I've read it. But these people were led by sprites to this very hilly, mountainous area that you couldn't grow anything. It was all rock. And they couldn't imagine why they'd been led there, but they just decided to go with it, and they just started composting, and they just created a paradise. So all you have to do is compost. You could make any place grow. Are there any more questions?
One of the tricks in making compost quickly, in a month or so, is when I build and do my compost, I use PVC pipe. And I'll put 5 or 6 sections of PVC pipe in a circle. And then I start layering and watering, layering and watering. When I get the thing built up to about 5 foot high, I pull the pipes out.
To get the air in between.
Pull the pipes out, okay? And now I've got these vents. And within a couple days, I have a thermometer I put in. Within a couple days, I'm over 100 degrees. Within a week, I'm up to 140 to 150 degrees. It's so hot, you can't touch it.
Is that because of the aeration?
Because of the aeration. They're letting the heat out because the microbes in there, in the center, will die a lot quicker because it gets hot.
Right.
By being able to vent the heat out, they last a lot longer and they do their work a lot quicker.
Right. And peeing on your compost. I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but I mean, there's your nitrogen. You know, there's the way to heat it up, and it's fun.
My 5-foot pile is now down to about this high.
I know. That's what I found last year. And the best plant in my whole garden last year grew out of my compost pile, and it was the mystery plant. And everybody would come over and look at it and think, "What in the hell is that?" And we couldn't figure it out. And it was like it kind of almost looked like a honeydew, but it was a little bit too oblong. But it was kind of pale green, and we're looking at it, looking at the leaves, and couldn't figure it out. And we had to wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. And finally, it started turning yellow, and it was spaghetti squash. They were this big. I've still got 2 of them that are perfectly fine from last summer in my shed, and they're, I mean, this big. And they're volunteers, and they just grew out of my compost. It's just a beautiful thing. Any more questions?
Is there any reason why you couldn't just lay black plastic on the ground and put the bales on it and then bring the plastic up the sides to hold the water in?
I would tend to imagine that they rot more quickly. I'm not sure that the roots would get the airflow. You could certainly try that with a bale or 2. I've thought about just putting wood on the outside of them.
I think you cook the bales for the heat. The black plastic would heat up tremendously in the summertime, and you would just cook everything.
Yeah, I don't think your plants would be happy.
Because that would help contain the water. Because one of the problems is that the water just keeps draining out the
Well,
bottom.
it's really not a problem with the hay, though. The hay really, you can really saturate it enough. And I totally do not recommend soaker hoses. Everybody I know that tried this, and the people that do the straw bale gardening, they all talked about these elaborate soaker hose setups. And the first year I did it, I tried soaker hoses, and I ripped them all out and threw them in the garbage. It didn't water evenly. It didn't soak the plants, and they took up so much room on the bales, and they kind of pushed things out of the way. And you want to really be hands-on with your garden. You want to look at your plants and know what's happening instead of flipping a switch somewhere and doing, that's not gardening. The plants don't like it.
When you say to soak your bale every day, like how much water really is that? You just hold those hose on there until it really, the whole thing is wet?
Yeah, you don't need to go crazy with it. You don't need to see puddles under the bale, but you just water. You'll know when you're watering it. You can feel it. Like you're watering a plant. You can always feel to see if the base of it is wet. But it takes me, with 40 bales that I had last year, it takes me less than a half an hour a day to tend my garden. Less than a half an hour. To water the whole garden and do everything I have to do takes me less than a half an hour. Because I can't be out in the sun. So that's one of the reasons I was able to do it. It's remarkably efficient. It really is.
Can we ask Dan, when you're buying hay, what the difference in price is between
There's really not any.
Well, no, rained on hay or
Oh.
slightly moldy hay. Most hay
I was-
farmers have some of that tucked away somewhere.
But you want tight bales. You want tight
But would there
bales.
be a difference in price?
Well, the thing I noticed was, if we bale real good hay and some's left in the field, it rots down really quickly in the field, sometimes gets moldy and it sort of slumps off enough. So I think you might need the structure of a lesser
You do.
quality bale like that.
Okay.
You need a tight bale.
So we have to buy the expensive hay.
No, you buy the cheap stuff.
Size bale you use that.
Yeah, no,
So they make real huge bales anymore.
I had heard somewhere about a 3-string bale, and that sounded real good to me, but I don't know exactly how big that is. I mean, I would love it if I could get a bale that was a little bit bigger than this.
3-string bale, 100 some pounds, you really don't want to deal with it.
Right.
What's the weight of it? What's the weight of one of these?
That's about
Ask
60
Dan.
pounds.
How heavy?
The weight of a bale of hay?
Probably 35 to 50 pounds.
Do they still do wire bales?
They're about 40.
There are wire bales. I mean, you still have, you have the wires at the end of the season. There's also plastic strings, which you may not want. These strings will be gone by, that's what that is, right? That's
Yes, and I'll tell you what I did last year. I got a couple of bales from somebody else before I found out about Dan, and they weren't as tight. And I just took a stick and stuck it in there and twisted around and then stuck it back in to tighten up. And if toward the end of the season, if your bales start loosening up, you can just tighten the strings up that way, and it works real well. Yeah. Well, I had to do some, a lot of it's just common sense.
I think we make a good farm.
$4 to $4.50 last year. What are they going to be this year, Dan?
What's that?
What are they going to be this year? Last year they were $4 to $4.50
I
last.
just seen
Depends on the weather
advertised
and
in the
fuel
penny
price and
pound,
everything else, so.
and that was.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'd say it will not change a whole lot, but it does depend on the weather for supply and fuel prices and so forth.
Well, if we were to buy bales from you now, what would they be?
They're like $5 bales, or sometimes with lesser quality ones that are a little less.
Everybody's running out.
Because I want you to put mine away before any of these other people, and I'm 130. But I can't get them for 2 weeks, so hold on. Any other?
He would know the answer to this. I had some first cutting Timothy that's pretty ripe. Do you think that is,
Yeah, I would think that'd be good,
that'd be good?
because it has more structure to it.
Yeah.
It's stuff that'll last longer through the summer. If you buy the best bale that's out there, it's gonna melt a lot quicker, I think.
Is that right?
Yeah, that may be, somebody could prove that out this summer. I mean, we haven't been doing
Well,
this.
that'd be a good
But the
idea.
best bale will have more nutrients.
Well, it will, but I'll tell you, using mulch grade hay with some fish emulsion and some compost tea, you just don't need any more nutrients in
It
that.
sounds like what you're using
He
it for
bales
medium.
really tight.
That's what I like, it's the
Some
tighter the
people-
better.
With some people, when you pick up the bale by the strings, the strings come up.
Those are the ones I have
Yeah.
to use the stick and twist them.
With Dan's bales, you can, if you want to pick them, grab them and get them together. You
Oh, I
can
know.
barely get them
But
together.
actually,
know.
they're raised bales, raised the baler too.
There you go.
Right.
I might mention, there's a lot of farmers in this county that would love to sell you hay, so don't.
Yup, there sure are, there sure are, and there are a lot of good ones in it. But you want to make sure that you're dealing with people that don't have junk in their hay. There's also people that have some funky weeds and stuff in their hay. You want to make sure you're dealing with a reputable farmer that
And
has
you don't
good
want
hay.
it coming from someplace where it's been sprayed.
Right.
Of any force or.
Right. Any more questions? And if there are any of you, I was totally serious when I said on the handout, I have lots of room at my place. And if there's anybody that would like to try this, that doesn't have a space to do it, although I find that unlikely with range people, but if that were the case, I'd be only too happy to share my space with any of you.